Hello to everyone that's tuned in. My name is Tilleke and I am a solutions consultant here at Adobe. And I'm here to talk to you today about Adobe's generative AI technology, which we call Firefly. Now I'm going to cover how it is commercially safe, as well as how we are using it to help to remove the drudge work out of your creative processes. So we'll start today with a little crash course on how Adobe Firefly works, and then we're going to jump into a couple demos so you can see it in action. Now, for those that don't already know, Firefly is available today in Photoshop, Illustrator, and as well as our latest product, Adobe Express. Now, before I get into the how it works, I wanted to talk about why a tool like Firefly or generative AI is so important to our creatives. And the problem that we face today is that more content than ever is needed to drive good customer experiences. We all know this. But let's take your sort of basic catalog example and crunch some numbers for a moment. So let's say, your company has 1,000 products to put into a catalog, and we need to create 25 asset variations for all the different media types for those 1,000 products. And then, of course, we have to tailor all those assets to the 15 different regions that we service for our company. And then finally, if we're executing well on this idea of personalization at scale, well, then we're going to need to factor in for the thousands of customer profiles and contexts who are consuming this product, right? Which would then require our design team to be creating millions of asset variations for this one catalog alone. That's not even to think about email marketing, social media, all those things. So where does that leave our design team? It leaves our designers feeling pretty burnt out, because the fact is that designers simply cannot produce quality work and keep up with this constant demand for content, right? So it's no wonder really that we're seeing this industry shift towards generative AI solutions as a way to keep up the pace. So why should we be turning to Adobe's generative AI solution, I hear you ask? Well, the answer to that is pretty easy, and that is because nobody is approaching generative AI in the way that Adobe is, especially as it relates to it being commercially viable generative AI. So what makes Adobe's approach unique to generative AI sort of relates to four things. And I'm going to cover off these one at a time, but I've got a too long didn't read down the bottom there for those who hate walls of text. But firstly, we are actually lucky enough to have the Adobe stock library as our data set, which trains our Firefly model. Now, the benefit of that is that we can rest easy knowing that Firefly is not scraping the internet for IP that we do not have the permissions to use. And therefore, it means that any images that Firefly actually creates is safe for commercial use, because we essentially have the right permissions in place concerning that original data set. So it's not muddying the waters in terms of our data set. And because, of course, Adobe wants to look after its creators as well as stock contributors, we actually give our contributors the ability to opt in or opt out of that machine learning process. So whatever your comfortability is, Adobe is happy to accommodate for that. So to test this idea of commercially safe generative AI, let's jump into Adobe Express, where Firefly actually exists as a standalone feature right here on the homepage. And let's just type in here, Mickey Mouse eating an ice cream at Disneyland. So you can see here, these are really great images, right? But they're clearly not Mickey Mouse, and this is clearly not Disneyland, although Firefly does know that Disneyland relates to some sort of fairground. So you can see that actually is surfacing here in this image, which I think is pretty cool. But the important part of this demo is the fact that this is not producing an image of Mickey Mouse. We actually say this is a feature, not a flaw, because it means we're not infringing on Disney's IP, and therefore we're not getting ourselves accidentally into any sort of legal trouble here, because Firefly is protecting us from infringing on those issues. Now, another point of difference is that the Firefly model itself is proprietary to Adobe, which relates both to our models and our product interfaces. But let's start with models. So proprietary meaning that we built this technology from the ground up using 40 years of industry experience building and integrating AI technology into all of our products. This is not new. We've been doing this for a very, very long time. But because Firefly sits in-house, what this does is it lowers the security risk to our customers because Adobe is not relying on third-party technology to support Gen AI functionality within our products. Which means the through line of that is it means we can offer our customers full control of their privacy preferences as we do with our Adobe stock contributors. They can switch settings on and off depending on their comfortability. And because the machine learning model is ours to actually play around with, we also have the ability to allow our customers to custom train their Firefly model. So we're currently exploring ways for our customers to load in their product catalog and then use Firefly to place those products within a certain environment. Now, the second piece to having proprietary technology impacts our product interfaces across all three of our Adobe clouds, that being the Experience Cloud, the Creative Cloud, and the Document Cloud. Now, when talking to this, I really like to use the example of why is it that no one seems to be able to make better Apple accessories than Apple themselves? So you think about the Apple Watch and AirPods and the way that those products just really integrate beautifully into the Apple product suite and make it a really lovely experience, right? Well, that is because no one has better access to Apple's operating system than Apple themselves, which is why it's so easy for them to make these beautiful, seamless integrations between their products and their technology. Now, that is the same for Adobe because we own the tools, that being Photoshop, Illustrator, and things like Adobe Express, as well as the technology. So the tools, the product, and the technology, that being Firefly. And because we own both, it means we're able to set up some really deep, frictionless integrations across our product portfolio, as opposed to, again, relying on APIs and third parties. So it's great that it all sits under the Adobe roof. And finally, that brings me to the way we talk about ethics and generative AI. Now, I could go on for hours about the way Adobe thinks about ethics as it relates to how people use our products. But I want to hone in on one thing for this session, and that is the Content Authenticity Initiative. So what is the Content Authenticity Initiative and why was it founded? Well, let's take a step back in time and have a look at the issues the Content Authenticity Initiative is trying to solve. So I'll cut to that.
Technology makes it difficult, maybe even impossible, to tell what's real and what's not.
Born in 1987, Adobe's Photoshop became the way a trained designer could alter reality.
The process involves taking an original image or picture, putting it up on a TV screen, and then beginning to play around with it and modify it. The operator can start to manipulate the square by changing it. Now, what this means is that by manipulating a picture at so basic a level, it can be changed in such a high-definition way that it's impossible to tell that those changes have been made artificially. The potential for the system goes a lot further than that. Operators say they can take a group photograph, for instance, and rearrange the people's heads on different shoulders in such perfect detail it would be impossible to tell a change had been made. It makes you wonder. A picture may still be worth 1,000 words, but what about that old saying, the camera never lies?
Now, AI-powered art takes no more skill than typing a few words. That means anyone can make an alien world or a fake news photo. The new Photoshop allows you to add AI to your pictures.
Photoshop for a generation has been the verb for digital creativity. Will we still talk about photoshopping things in a generation?
I think the era of Photoshop just went into hyperactive mode.
And I'm back. So you can see that this question of is seeing believing in a digital first world where we can edit images, it's not really a new question, right? And particularly, it's not a new question for Adobe. We've been facing this question since the 80s when we brought Photoshop to market. But let's consider image editing as it relates to these two examples. So first, we have a delicious looking burger that's definitely had a bit of marketing magic added to it, which is arguably misleading, given that burgers almost never look like they do in the photo. I know from plenty of experience there. But the second image, the second instance relates to an image that circulated online of an explosion that was occurring near the Pentagon. Now, this wasn't real, but once it started circulating online, it actually caused the stock market to dip immediately. So what we have here is a low risk and a high risk example of image editing. One causing relatively minimal damage to the consumer because we can all reasonably assume that a bit of marketing magic goes into selling products. But the other is really quite concerning, and we don't want to see it affecting our trusted sources like news outlets and news organizations. So the Content Authenticity Initiative was founded by Adobe and a lot of other major logos to help combat misleading imagery and prevent things like misinformation. So each one of these logos here is actually committed to fighting this problem of misinformation by authenticating how we capture, edit, publish and certify images online. Now, all of these logos are contributing in their own way. For example, Leica is adding metadata into their cameras. So from the very beginning, we are binding metadata to our imagery. But I'm going to talk about how Adobe is contributing in just a moment. But back to that story, we can see that this guy on Twitter used some lateral thinking to authenticate, or rather to debunk the authenticity of this image by clocking a few AI tells, as well as realizing, hey, there's no other images or videos of this event circulating online. So where are the other first-hand witnesses? So he very cleverly detected that this is not a real image. But we're going to need ways that go beyond just lateral thinking, especially as AI starts to get better and better. So Adobe's contribution to the Content Authenticity Initiative is content credentials, which sits also within the metadata of an image and basically serves as a nutrition label to that image. So it certifies where that image has come from and what changes have actually been made to that image. Now you can switch this on, so we'll jump into Photoshop now. So you can switch this on by going into Photoshop and ensuring that you have the content credentials window selected, and then it will show up in your editing domain. And then you simply click enable and you will have a clear record of what edits have been made to that image, which ultimately gives the end user the right level of insight they need in order for them to assess whether or not they're going to buy into this image or not. So that level of transparency is really, really important as we move into the age of Gen AI. So that brings me to the end of my crash course on Adobe Firefly, but I did want to leave you today with an example of how we use Gen AI in our day-to-day to drive those efficiency gains that we talked about at the top of this session. Now let's have a look at Firefly in Photoshop as it relates to our imagined company weekend. Now we have a product here that we would like to create a web banner for, and this web banner is going to surface in 5 different ways according to the different user profiles of our customers. Now you can see here on my right, we have our pre-approved branded assets in our brand library, which we can then use to pull in things like logos, colors, and of course our products. So we're going to bring in our weekend water bottle here. Now, because we are needing to create 5 different product shots or variations for our website, I'm going to use generative fill to speed up the process of personalizing for our customer. So if I use this object select tool here to grab my product and then click select inverse, I can then use a text prompt to tailor for my target audience. So my first prompt is for our customer who we've identified as an adventurer. So I'm going to use words that suit this profile, customer profile. Now what Firefly will do is it will consider the things like depth of field, lighting cues that indicate where the lighting is actually coming from. And then the output will mimic these design elements, I guess, so that our product looks like it sits reasonably within that environment. So here you can see we have 3 options that Firefly has generated for us, and we can actually continue to iterate on this prompt until we are happy with the final outcome. So that is looking all good to me. Now, switching customer profiles now, so creating an asset for a new customer profile, I want to target the customer who responds to very sleek, minimalist product advertising. So I'd like to keep my background pretty simple, but I want to reflect my product on the surface. And what you can see here is That is not a problem for Adobe Firefly, which saves the time and effort of our creatives so that they can focus on more important design tasks rather than reflecting imagery on a surface. Now, you can see what I've done here is I've repeated this process until I have my 5 personalized images that I'm happy with. And if need be, I can even actually expand the background using the expand background tool. And I can expand that on a Firefly generated image. So what's great about this is it makes my asset immediately much more versatile in that it's able to be cropped for all the various other usages like square for socials or vertical for the phone screen. So again, I'm using Firefly technology to really make the most out of my original asset and expand the possibilities in terms of how that asset is used. So there you have it, everyone. Adobe Firefly, how it works and how it looks in our products. I hope this sheds some light onto why our generative AI technology is so special, as well as give you some ideas on how to eliminate that awful drudge work from your everyday design tasks. So that's all from me. I will see you next time.